In a secure chamber deep within Capitol Hill, Representative Jasmine Crockett prepared to speak a name that would shatter the silence around the First Lady. What happened next in those 38 seconds would expose a web of international intrigue that reached straight into the heart of the White House. It began with a message Jasmine almost ignored. The clock showed nearly midnight when she finished a grueling interview about digital security breaches affecting senior administration officials. Exhausted in the back seat of her government sedan, she scrolled through her secure communications when an encrypted alert appeared. The subject line was stark. The truth about her foreign meetings. Verify the records. The sender was anonymous, routing through multiple secure European servers. Inside the message was no text, only a compressed file marked Flotus Travel Archive RO2 and a cryptic note. The individual you need to investigate appears 5 times. Start with Vienna. She downloaded the file but waited until reaching her Arlington residence before opening it. Even then, she hesitated. This could be disinformation, a trap, or worse. The files were authentic raw data from White House internal travel coordination systems, something she'd encountered only once before during classified briefings. These weren't sanitized or redacted. Every timestamp was precise, documenting official and private movements linked to Melania Trump's international travel. Flight manifests, accommodation details, staff assignments, payment authorizations, and one puzzling column labeled External Liaison Reference Code. Adjacent to that column, across 5 separate entries, appeared the same identifier, Dragan Petrovic. Jasmine had never encountered this name, but his pattern was unmistakable. Each time Petrovic appeared in the logs, Secret Service documentation became sparse or completely absent. She contacted Julius, her trusted intelligence liaison, requesting immediate but discreet verification of the data's authenticity. While waiting for confirmation, she spread the documents across her apartment floor, connecting Melania's solo international trips over the past 7 months to concurrent global events she'd been briefed on weeks earlier. One trip coincided with an art theft investigation in Budapest. Another aligned with frozen financial accounts in Luxembourg. A third corresponded to clandestine negotiations between cultural brokers and former diplomats in Amsterdam. Each time, Petrovic's presence lingered in the background like a shadow. Julius returned the next morning with troubling confirmation. The travel logs were legitimate, extracted from systems accessible only to the highest levels of national security personnel. If someone had leaked this information, it represented a deliberate, calculated disclosure from within the inner circle. Jasmine spent the following night creating connections between each of Melania's undocumented meetings and international incidents that had puzzled intelligence analysts for months. The patterns were too precise to be coincidental. By the 4th night, she faced a choice: bury the evidence and pretend she'd never seen it, or bring it before the reconvened subcommittee on executive security protocols. Going public meant accusations of political warfare. Staying silent meant potential national security compromises. She'd never retreated from uncomfortable battles. The evidence went into a secured briefcase, and she scheduled the next closed session. The winter wind cut through downtown Washington as Jasmine exited the Capitol complex around 9:20 that evening. She didn't use her official vehicle, instead requesting private transportation under a false identity, following protocols learned during previous sensitive investigations. The driver delivered her to a nondescript townhouse in suburban Maryland. A single porch light flickered on, then off, then on again before she approached. Inside, Rufus Kane waited with coffee and concern. The former NSA data specialist had helped her expose voter manipulation schemes in Georgia 5 years earlier. He owed her, and more importantly, he despised secrets that endangered civilians. Rufus examined the documents silently, his expression unchanging until he reached Petrovic's entries. He set the papers down slowly and exhaled through his nose. These records shouldn't exist in accessible form. Someone with administrator-level clearance pulled them from secure servers and routed them through international proxies before reaching you. I didn't solicit this information, Jasmine replied, which means someone wanted you to discover it. Either they're exposing a legitimate threat or they're setting you up for destruction. Rufus connected his laptop to an encrypted drive and within minutes confirmed her worst fears. The files were authentic, deep-access logs that even Secret Service leadership couldn't fully monitor. Internal routing showed the original extraction occurred 13 days earlier, then passed through 4 anonymous overseas networks before landing in her inbox. Someone inside the administration is deliberately bleeding this information, he said. The digital fingerprints trace back to a secure terminal in the Eisenhower Executive Office building. That's within walking distance of the West Wing. Someone operating directly under their noses, Jasmine murmured. Rufus leaned forward. Do you understand the implications if this proves accurate? If she's been meeting this individual without proper oversight, this transcends personal relationships. This becomes espionage-level exposure. Someone with unrestricted access to her conversations could manipulate international policy decisions. This represents national security compromise, potentially treasonous if proven. Jasmine studied Petrovic's name across multiple documents. She still didn't know his complete background, but the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Multiple clandestine meetings, no standard security escorts, no media coverage, no surveillance documentation, and most alarmingly, timestamps that corresponded exactly with President Trump's NATO weapons discussions the previous autumn, while Melania was reportedly at a separate hotel in the same European city. I'm bringing this to the committee hearing next week, she told Rufus. You're making a dangerous mistake. That chamber doesn't want accountability, it wants obedience. Ask these questions publicly, and half of Congress will try to end your career. I'm accustomed to that pressure, but if this individual represents something more sinister, if there's deeper corruption, I won't ignore it to maintain political courtesy. She gathered the documents and secured them in her case. Rufus escorted her to the door. Watch your surroundings. When the walls start closing in, you'll recognize it too late. The following morning, she contacted trusted legal advisors and arranged private briefings. Her questions were crafted carefully, not accusations or theatrics, but strategic threads that, when pulled, could unravel something larger than anyone in that chamber anticipated. The hearing convened at 2:15 sharp in the Rayburn House office building, room 2174. No cameras, no journalists, no official transcripts. Only high-clearance committee members, 2 senior White House representatives, and a national security attorney who appeared sleep-deprived. Jasmine sat in the third chair from the left, steady and prepared. Her folder remained sealed. She'd reviewed her questions twice that morning, each word designed to walk precisely between investigation and accusation. Representative Lowell Nash, subcommittee chairman, opened the session at 2:17. We're addressing newly identified security vulnerabilities flagged by internal audits concerning executive travel protocols. Representative Crockett, you submitted inquiry topics yesterday for review. You have the floor. Jasmine cleared her throat, but remained seated. I appreciate the chairman's recognition. My concerns focus on systematic patterns, not isolated incidents. While reviewing access logs connected to the First Lady's international travel, I discovered unusual irregularities. Specifically, I'm referencing a series of undocumented rendezvous during overseas diplomatic missions, where Secret Service records were incomplete and flight manifest details were ambiguous or heavily redacted, despite clear policies requiring full transparency. The atmosphere shifted subtly. One White House representative, a distinguished man in a navy suit with a discreet earpiece, whispered to his colleague. Jasmine continued. I've identified a specific individual, Dragan Petrovic, whose name appears in connection with 5 of the First Lady's unscheduled international meetings. These occurred in Vienna, Budapest, Luxembourg, Amsterdam, and Munich over 7 months. Representative Howard Steele, seated 2 chairs to her right, scoffed audibly. Are we seriously entertaining gossip about the First Lady's travel companions? This isn't gossip. It's about gaps in our national security documentation. If a private civilian with alleged connections to high-risk financial networks repeatedly appears near the First Lady during diplomatic missions without official oversight, don't we have an obligation to investigate? Silence settled over the room. Nash finally looked up. Representative Crockett, are you suggesting the First Lady is involved in collusion with a foreign operative? I'm stating that the documentation points to a relationship requiring oversight. I'm not here to suggest personal improprieties. I'm here to ask how an individual flagged in 4 Interpol notices gained proximity to the First Lady without documented clearance. One representative leaned into his microphone. This line of questioning wasn't pre-approved. We weren't informed of these documents prior to this hearing. Because they weren't obtained through official channels, they were leaked, and I verified their authenticity before bringing them here. You're admitting to using illicit documents, Steele fired back. I'm admitting that when classified travel information reveals a security breach that nobody's addressing, I don't look away. After a long pause, she reached into her case and slid the folder across the table. This contains sealed log extractions from the White House Internal Travel Archive. It includes timestamps, transport data, cross-reference security identifiers, and payment links connected to accommodations where the First Lady stayed without complete Secret Service accompaniment. The senior representative stood. We strongly advise this material be entered off the record. These files may constitute an active investigation or fall under executive privilege. You're welcome to redact them after we verify the data in committee. Nash nodded cautiously. Proceed carefully. Jasmine opened the folder and located the Budapest entry. On November 8th, the First Lady landed at Budapest Ferenc Liszt International Airport under diplomatic clearance. Scheduled purpose: Cultural Heritage Initiative with regional arts ministers. No press coverage, no televised appearances. According to the logs, she spent 5 hours off-grid during which Dragan Petrovic registered at the same hotel wing. Surveillance cameras experienced technical difficulties. No Secret Service log was filed for that period, and this isn't an isolated occurrence. Committee aides along the back wall were shifting nervously. The 2 White House representatives had stopped taking notes entirely. We need to understand what was discussed. We need to know who authorized this individual's proximity to the First Lady, and we need to determine whether these meetings compromised federal negotiations occurring simultaneously. Steele leaned in again, more slowly this time. You're playing with fire, Congresswoman. She turned to face him directly. So be it. The room's energy had shifted dramatically. Someone else realized this wasn't merely bold political theater. It was genuinely dangerous. There are moments in politics where silence conveys more than any statement. This was one of them. Jasmine hadn't planned to speak the name aloud. She intended to let the documentation speak for itself. But Steele's repeated attempts to redirect the conversation away from facts and toward her judgment pushed her further than anticipated. She tapped the Budapest log page, looked around the table, and spoke with clarity that cut through the stale congressional atmosphere. The individual's name is Dragan Petrovic. He's not a staffer. He's not a diplomat. He lacks proper clearance. But he has been present in the same foreign facilities as the First Lady 5 times this year without oversight. Nobody breathed. Not the aides, not the attorneys, not even the security officers flanking the back entrance. What Jasmine couldn't have known was that the First Lady herself was monitoring the proceedings, not from the East Wing, but from a private secure room in the White House residence. Staff had been alerted that Crockett might introduce sensitive material into the hearing, so Melania requested a closed-circuit feed with no staff present, no note-takers, just her and the monitor. At 2:48, when Jasmine spoke Petrovic's name aloud, Melania stood abruptly, knocking over a half-full water glass. A junior aide, one of the few people permitted in the adjacent hallway, witnessed her stumble slightly before disappearing behind a side door. The video feed was terminated seconds later. Back in the chamber, nobody spoke for nearly a full minute. Jasmine waited patiently. She wasn't reckless. She'd measured every sentence carefully, but now the weight of what she'd just triggered was becoming apparent. Chairman Nash tapped the table with his pen. This session is hereby moved to restricted legal review. Committee members may remain. All White House observers and external aides must exit until further instruction. The exodus was swift and silent. When the door clicked shut behind them, Nash looked directly at Jasmine. "Do you understand what you may have just opened?" "I understand the risk, but the greater risk is ignoring the connection between Petrovic and foreign policy compromises tied to these trips. You're suggesting there's a pattern of influence. I'm suggesting we've already been compromised and nobody wants to acknowledge it." Representative Steele produced a folded document from his jacket, a response memo from the office of the First Lady, crafted that morning in anticipation of questioning. He tossed it onto the table. "You're not the only one who received advanced intelligence. The East Wing denies knowing Petrovic. They claim he's never met the First Lady." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then explain the cross-referenced hotel logs, the travel receipts in his name billed to the same facilities, the security camera blackouts, and why their phones connected to the same cellular towers for 5 consecutive nights in Luxembourg." Steele leaned back, arms crossed. "You're walking the line between investigation and slander. And you're avoiding the truth." Nash raised both hands. "Enough. This is no longer procedural." He turned to Jasmine again. "I'll authorize a review, quietly, internal first. If what you're presenting is legitimate, if Petrovic has been near the First Lady multiple times without clearance, we must treat this as a security breach. But if this is political theater..." "It's not, Chairman Nash." Outside the chamber, events were accelerating beyond anyone's expectations. Security at the White House had suddenly restricted access to the East Wing. Internal communications were locked down. Staffers were instructed to disable personal devices. One junior press liaison later described it as a complete shutdown, like someone pulled the emergency brake on normal operations. Behind that wall of silence, Melania Trump was reportedly in private emergency meetings with 2 of the president's national security advisors. Whatever Jasmine had ignited was already burning, but she wasn't finished yet. The next set of logs would make everything that came before seem elementary.